The fluorescent lights of Henderson Manufacturing hummed their constant drone above the factory floor, casting harsh shadows across rows of industrial machinery. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, and the Detroit suburb was already awake, its workforce filing through the employee entrance with travel mugs and tired eyes. The air inside smelled of metal shavings, hydraulic fluid, and the burnt coffee that had been sitting in the breakroom pot since the night shift started. Marcus Wellington had worked at Henderson for 23 years. At 51, he wore his experience like the oil stains on his work coveralls, permanent, earned, impossible to wash away. His hands were calloused from decades of maintaining the factory's heart, a massive CNC machining center that had been cutting precision parts since 1987. Everyone called it Big Bertha, though Marcus couldn't remember who'd given it that name or why. "Morning, Marcus," called out Pete Alvarez, the floor supervisor, as he made his rounds. Pete was younger, maybe 35, with the kind of energy that came from still believing promotions were just around the corner. "How's our girl running today?" Marcus didn't look up from the control panel, where he was reviewing the overnight production logs. His reading glasses sat low on his nose, and the morning light caught the silver in his close-cropped beard. "She's running rough. Been hearing a grinding noise from the spindle for 2 days now, put in a work order Friday, but nobody's looked at it yet. Yeah, maintenance is backed up. Got 3 machines down in Building C." Pete checked his tablet, scrolling through the day's production schedule. "Can she make it through today? We've got the Chrysler order that has to ship by Thursday." "She'll make it," Marcus said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "But we need to get someone on that spindle bearing before it turns into something bigger." Pete nodded, already moving to the next station, already thinking about the next crisis. That was how it worked at Henderson. You kept things running with duct tape and prayers until the duct tape failed, then you found more duct tape. By 9:30 a.m., the grinding noise had gotten worse. Marcus could feel it through the concrete floor, a vibration that shouldn't be there, like a heartbeat with an extra beat. The other workers felt it too. Jenny Morrison, who ran the smaller CNC machines near the back wall, kept glancing over with concern, creasing her forehead. "Marcus, that doesn't sound good," she said during the mid-morning break, stirring sugar into her coffee at the breakroom table. She was in her early 40s, a single mother of 2 who'd been at Henderson for 7 years. Her station was clean, organized, efficient, everything Marcus appreciated in a co-worker. "I know." He stared at his own coffee, black, going cold in his hands. "I've been on Pete about it, but you know how it is. They're trying to squeeze one more day, one more shift, one more order out of everything. What happens if she goes down completely? Then the Chrysler order doesn't ship. Then we're behind on Ford's parts. Then the whole production schedule goes to hell." He took a sip of the bitter coffee. "And then corporate starts asking questions about why we let it get this bad." Jenny shook her head. "It's always the same story. Wait until it breaks, then panic." At 11:15 a.m., Big Bertha made the decision for them. Marcus was running a batch of transmission housings when the grinding became a shriek. Metal on metal, the sound of something tearing itself apart. He hit the emergency stop, and the machine shuddered to a halt, smoke rising from somewhere deep in its mechanical guts. "Pete!" Marcus shouted across the factory floor. "We're down." The next 2 hours were chaos. Pete called maintenance. Maintenance called the machine shop supervisor. The supervisor called the plant manager. The plant manager called corporate. Everyone had opinions. Nobody had solutions. By 2 p.m., 3 different maintenance techs had looked at Big Bertha and delivered the same verdict. The main spindle bearing was destroyed. Parts would take a week to arrive, maybe 2. The repair would take days. The Chrysler order was going to be late. The Ford order would be later. Henderson Manufacturing was looking at serious penalties. "God damn it," Pete muttered, running his hand through his hair as he stood in front of the silent machine. Around them, the factory continued its work, but everyone knew. When Big Bertha was down, everything was different. "Marcus, give it to me straight. Is there any way to limp this thing along?" Marcus had his hand on the machine's housing, feeling for the heat, the wrongness. No, the bearings seized. Keep running, it will damage the spindle itself. Then we're looking at a complete rebuild. $50,000–$60,000, maybe more. Jesus. Pete's face had gone pale. He was thinking about his job, about the questions that would come from above. There's got to be something. There isn't. I'm sorry, Pete. I told you Friday we needed to shut her down. Pete nodded slowly, the reality settling in. Okay, I'll call the meeting. We'll have to redistribute the work to the other machines, bring in overtime, maybe farm some of it out to Kelton's shop across town. He paused, looking at the massive machine like it was a fallen soldier. You did good, Marcus. This isn't on you, but it felt like it was. 23 years Marcus had kept Big Bertha running. 23 years of listening to her rhythms, learning her quirks, knowing exactly how much play the feed mechanisms could take, how hot the coolant should run, which noises meant trouble and which were just her getting old. And now she was down, and he'd let it happen. The afternoon crawled by. Marcus filled out incident reports, walked through the shutdown procedures, drained the coolant lines, secured the work area. Other workers came by to look, to offer sympathy, to share their own stories of machines that had died on their watch. It was like a wake. At 4:30 p.m., just as Marcus was thinking about calling his wife Linda to tell her he'd be late because of the paperwork, Pete came back with someone Marcus didn't recognize. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore clean work clothes that looked new, safety glasses pushed up on her forehead, and carried a worn leather tool bag that looked like it had seen serious use. Her skin was light brown, and she had the kind of focused intensity in her eyes that Marcus recognized from the best mechanics he'd ever worked with. Marcus, this is Sarah Chen, Pete said, and there was something in his voice. Hope, maybe, or desperation, dressed up as confidence. She's from Precision Machine Services. Corporate sent her. Sarah extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her palms slightly rough with calluses. Mr. Wellington, Pete's been telling me about the situation. Mind if I take a look? Marcus glanced at Pete, confused. I thought we were waiting on parts. Just let her look, Pete said quietly. Sarah was already moving toward Big Bertha, her eyes scanning the machine with the kind of systematic attention that impressed Marcus despite himself. She set down her tool bag and pulled out a small flashlight, checking the access panels, examining the control board, listening to Pete's description of what had happened. How long have you been working with this machine? She asked Marcus. 23 years. So you know her pretty well. Better than I know my own car. Sarah smiled slightly at that. When did you first notice the problem? Friday morning, grinding noise from the spindle assembly. Put in a work order, but he stopped himself, no point in pointing fingers. But maintenance was busy, Sarah finished. She wasn't judging, just stating facts. And it got progressively worse. Yeah, bearings don't fix themselves. No, they don't. She opened her tool bag and pulled out a stethoscope, the kind mechanics use, with a long metal probe instead of a diaphragm. Can you power her up for me? Just the electrics, not the spindle motor. Marcus looked at Pete, who nodded. He went to the control panel and brought up the electrical systems. Lights flickered on across Big Bertha's console, familiar and somehow sad, without the usual sounds of motion. Sarah moved around the machine with the stethoscope, placing the probe against different points on the housing, listening intently. Marcus watched her work. She had good technique, patient, methodical, not rushing. She spent 5 minutes just listening, her eyes closed, concentrating on sounds only she could hear. When she opened her eyes, she looked at Marcus. Can you give me the maintenance history for the past 6 months? It's all in the computer. I can pull it up. They moved to the nearby workstation, and Marcus logged into the maintenance tracking system. Sarah leaned over his shoulder, scanning through the entries. Her finger traced down the screen, stopping at certain records, moving on, coming back. Here, she said, pointing. July 15th, spindle motor replaced. Yeah, the old one burned out. We got a rebuild from the supplier. And this entry from August 2nd. Unusual vibration reported, checked and cleared. Marcus remembered that day. The new motor was running a little different. The tech said it was within spec. Within spec, Sarah repeated, and there was something in her tone. She straightened up, looking at the machine across the factory floor. Mr. Wellington, I don't think your bearing failed. Pete and Marcus both stared at her. What are you talking about? Pete said. 3 different maintenance guys looked at it. They all said the same thing. I'm sure they did, and I'm sure they're all good at their jobs. Sarah walked back to Big Bertha, Marcus and Pete following. But they were looking at the symptom, not the cause. The bearing didn't fail. It was being destroyed by something else. By what? Marcus asked, and he realized he was leaning forward, wanting to understand, wanting her to be right. Sarah knelt down beside the machine and opened the access panel to the spindle housing. The smell of hot metal and burnt bearing grease wafted out. She shone her flashlight inside and gestured for Marcus to look. See that? The bearing seized, yes, but look at the wear pattern. It's not symmetrical. The damage is all on one side. Marcus looked. She was right. Years of experience told him she was right, and he felt stupid for not seeing it himself. That means the spindle shaft was running off center, Sarah continued. Something was pulling it to one side, putting all the load on half the bearing. Eventually, it couldn't take it anymore. The motor alignment, Marcus breathed. The replacement motor. Exactly. When they installed the new motor, they didn't align it properly. It's been pulling the spindle shaft off center for 4 months, wearing down that bearing gradually until it seized. You probably started hearing the noise when the bearing finally developed enough play that the shaft could bounce. Pete was shaking his head, but not in disbelief, in amazement. So you're saying we can fix this? I'm saying I can fix this, Sarah said. And there was no arrogance in it, just confidence. I need to realign the motor coupling and check the shaft for damage. If the shaft's okay, and I think it will be, I can replace just the bearing and have you running by tomorrow morning. Nuggies, tomorrow morning? Pete's voice cracked slightly. The other guys said a week minimum. The other guys were planning to replace the whole spindle assembly because they thought the bearing failure was catastrophic. Sarah was already pulling tools from her bag. Calipers, alignment gauges, micrometers. It's not. This is fixable. I just need Mr. Wellington's help. She looked at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes. Respect, an invitation, a recognition of his years and his knowledge. Call me Marcus, he said. What do you need? The factory floor had mostly emptied by 6 p.m. The day shift had gone home to their families, their dinners, their evening routines. The night shift wouldn't arrive until 10 p.m., leaving a strange quiet in the building where usually there was none. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter in the emptiness, and the sound of Sarah's tools echoed off the metal walls. Marcus had called Linda. She'd understood immediately, the way she always did after 27 years of marriage. Fix your machine, she'd said simply. I'll keep your dinner warm. Pete had stayed too, though he was mostly pacing near the supervisor's office, making calls, managing the fallout of the day's shutdown. Every 15 minutes he'd wander back to check on their progress, hovering like a nervous parent in a delivery room. Sarah worked with a precision that reminded Marcus of a surgeon. She'd removed the motor coupling cover and was now measuring the alignment with a laser tool that projected red beams across the connection point. Numbers flickered on a small digital display. 3.2 millimeters off center, she said, more to herself than to Marcus. No wonder it was tearing up the bearing. Marcus handed her the Allen wrench she'd need for the next step. He'd quickly fallen into a rhythm with her, anticipating what tools she'd need, holding the flashlight at the right angle, steadying parts while she worked. It felt natural, like they'd been working together for years instead of hours. You're good at this, she said, loosening the motor mounting bolts. The anticipating. Most people I work with just stand there waiting to be told what to do. 23 years on one machine, you learn to think ahead. Marcus watched as she carefully adjusted the motor position, a fraction of a millimeter at a time. "Where'd you learn to diagnose like that? The bearing failure? My dad ran a machine shop in San Francisco. Started teaching me when I was 8. She checked her laser alignment, made another micro-adjustment. "He said machines talk to you if you know how to listen." Your dad was right. He usually was. There was something in her voice, a past tense that carried weight. "He passed away 2 years ago. Heart attack, 58 years old." "I'm sorry." "Me too." She tightened one bolt, loosened another. "But he taught me everything he knew. Said the best mechanics don't just fix things, they understand why things break. The bearing wasn't the problem, it was the victim." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd been fixing things for decades, but he'd never quite articulated it that way. The bearing was the victim. The misalignment was the crime. 2.1 millimeters, Sarah said, checking her gauge. "Getting there." Pete appeared again, coffee in hand, looking worn down by stress. "How's it going?" "We're aligning the motor," Marcus said. "It's precise work. Can't rush it." I know. Pete took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the taste. "It's just corporates breathing down my neck. They want to know if we'll make the Chrysler deadline." "Tell them we'll know by tomorrow morning," Sarah said, not looking up from her work. "If the spindle shaft isn't damaged, we'll make the deadline. If it is, we won't." "Very reassuring," Pete muttered, but he walked away, giving them space. "He's under a lot of pressure," Marcus said, feeling the need to defend his supervisor. "I know. I've worked with 100 Petes. Good guys trying to keep everything running with one hand tied behind their backs." She made another adjustment. 1.3 millimeters. Almost there. They worked in silence for a while, and Marcus found himself thinking about his own years at Henderson. 23 years of keeping Big Bertha alive, of knowing her rhythms, of fixing her problems. 23 years of watching management change, of policies that made less sense, of being asked to do more with less. When had he stopped really seeing the machine? When had he started just going through the motions? "You ever think about leaving?" he asked Sarah. "Doing something else?" She glanced at him, a quick assessment. "Manufacturing? No. This is what I know, what I'm good at." She paused, then added, "But I learned the hard way that you can't just keep things running. You have to fix them right or they'll break worse next time." "Sounds like you've got a story there." "A few." She checked her alignment again. 0.6 millimeters. One more adjustment. "Can you hold this steady?" Marcus put his hands on the motor housing, feeling the vibration of the building through his palms. Sarah loosened the final bolt, made an almost imperceptible adjustment, then tightened it again. "Check the reading," she said. Marcus looked at the digital display. 0.2 millimeters. "That's within tolerance." Sarah stood up, stretching her back. She'd been bent over the machine for nearly 2 hours. "Now comes the hard part. We need to remove the bearing and inspect the spindle shaft. If there's scoring or damage, we're in trouble. And if there's not, then we replace the bearing, button everything up, and you're back in business." "You make it sound simple." "It's not, but it's not impossible either." She looked at him directly. "I need you to trust me on this, Marcus. The next part requires 2 people who know what they're doing. I can't do it alone." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Pride, maybe, or purpose. "Tell me what you need." They began the careful process of disassembling the spindle housing. It was delicate work, each bolt removed in sequence, each component labeled and set aside. Sarah explained everything as they went, not condescending but teaching, sharing her knowledge the way his own mentors had shared theirs decades ago. "See how the housing has these index marks?" She pointed to tiny etched lines on the metal. "When we reassemble, everything has to line up exactly. Off by even a degree and we'll have problems." "I see them." "Good. When we pull the bearing, we need to support the shaft. Can't let it drop or shift. You'll hold this side. I'll work the bearing off from the other end." They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the machine. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment. Years of experience culminating in this careful collaboration with someone he'd met only hours ago. "On three," Sarah said. "1, 2, 3. The bearing slid off with a grinding sound that made Marcus wince. But then it was free, and Sarah was holding it up in the light, examining the destroyed metal with the intensity of an archaeologist with a precious artifact. "Look at that wear pattern," she said. "All on one side, just like I thought. This bearing never had a chance." But Marcus wasn't looking at the bearing. He was looking at the spindle shaft, now exposed, gleaming under the factory lights. "Sarah, the shaft!" She moved to his side, and he heard her breath catch. The shaft was perfect. No scoring, no damage, no sign of the trauma that should have marked it. "It's clean," she said, and there was relief in her voice. "The bearing gave up before it could damage the shaft, so we can fix it." "Yeah." She smiled, and it transformed her face from focused professional to someone younger, someone who still found joy in solving problems. "Yeah, Marcus, we can fix it." By 8 p.m. they had the new bearing ready. Sarah had brought several with her, different sizes, different specs, because she'd learned to always be prepared. This one was German-made, precision ground, rated for twice the load of the original. "Better than factory spec?" Marcus asked. "Always upgrade when you can," Sarah said. "Why fix something just to have it break again?" They worked together to slide the bearing onto the shaft, using a hydraulic press that Sarah had borrowed from the maintenance shop. The metal whispered as it moved into place, settling with a solid click that Marcus felt in his bones. "That's the sound of things fitting right," Sarah said. "My dad used to say you can hear the difference between forced and fitted. This is fitted." They reassembled the housing, each component going back in reverse order, each bolt torqued to exact specifications that Sarah read from a worn manual she'd pulled from her bag. Marcus held the flashlight, passed the tools, double-checked the index marks that would ensure everything aligned perfectly. "You ever train anyone?" Sarah asked as they worked. "Not really. Henderson doesn't do much of that anymore. Cheaper to hire from outside than develop people internally." "That's short-sighted." "That's corporate." Sarah laughed, a quick sound in the empty factory. "Fair point." She tightened the last bolt. "But you should train someone. You've got too much knowledge to let it walk out the door when you retire." Marcus thought about retirement, still a few years away but approaching. He'd been at Henderson for almost a quarter-century. What would happen to Big Bertha when he was gone? Who would know her quirks, her needs, her voice? "Maybe," he said quietly. By 9:30 p.m., they were ready for the moment of truth. The bearing was installed, the motor aligned, the housing reassembled. Sarah checked everything one final time, then looked at Marcus. "You want to do the honors?" Marcus moved to the control panel. His hand hovered over the start button, and he realized his heart was pounding. 23 years of keeping this machine alive. And now, with the help of someone he'd just met, they'd brought her back from what everyone else had called death. He pressed the button. Big Bertha hummed to life, not the grinding, tortured sound of this morning, but her old sound, smooth, strong, confident. The spindle began to turn, slowly at first, then faster, building to operating speed. Sarah had her hand on the housing, feeling for vibration, listening for any sign of trouble. "How's she feel?" Marcus asked. Sarah's smile was all the answer he needed. "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." Pete came running from his office, coffee sloshing in his cup. Is she running?" "She's running," Marcus confirmed. "Jesus Christ!" Pete set down his coffee and just stared at the machine, like he was witnessing a resurrection. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Sarah corrected. She pulled a small notebook from her bag and started writing. "But we're not done yet. We need to run a test program, check all the movements, verify the tolerances. I'm not signing off on this until we know she's really ready." Dive for the next 2 hours. They put Big Bertha through her paces. Sarah had Marcus run a series of increasingly complex programs, checking the output with precision measuring tools. Each part came out within specification. Each movement was smooth and controlled. By midnight, even Sarah had to admit it. Big Bertha was fixed. The night shift had trickled in around 10 p.m., and word had spread quickly. Big Bertha was running again. Workers kept finding excuses to walk past, to see the machine that had been declared dead now, humming away as if nothing had happened. Marcus saw the looks they gave him and Sarah, respect, curiosity, maybe a little envy that they'd been part of something important. Sarah was packing up her tools when Pete approached with a man Marcus didn't immediately recognize. He was in his 60s, wearing khakis and a button-down shirt with a Henderson Manufacturing logo, corporate casual. His face was weathered in that way that came from years of factory floors and tough decisions. "Sarah, Marcus," Pete said, and there was something formal in his voice. "This is Robert Henderson. He owns the company." Marcus straightened up, suddenly aware of the oil stains on his coveralls. He'd known Henderson had a local owner, not like the massive conglomerates that had bought up most of the other plants in the area, but he'd never actually met the man. Henderson extended his hand, first to Sarah, then to Marcus. His grip was firm, his palms calloused. Not a desk jockey then, or at least not always. "Pete called me at home, told me what happened. I had to see it for myself." "She's running good, Mr. Henderson," Marcus said. "Better than she has in months." "So I hear." Henderson walked to Big Bertha, put his hand on her housing the way Marcus often did, feeling her rhythm. "My father bought this machine in 1987. I was 25 years old, working the floor just like you. I watched them install her, learned to run her myself before I ever sat in an office." He turned back to face them. "I thought she was done. Everyone thought she was done." "Everyone was wrong," Sarah said simply. Henderson laughed, a sound that seemed surprised out of him. "I like that. Direct." He looked at Pete. "You said she diagnosed the problem in what, 30 minutes? "About that. Yes, sir. And fixed it in—" Henderson checked his watch. 6 hours, give or take." "Yes, sir." Henderson nodded slowly, his eyes moving between Sarah and Marcus. "I got 3 phone calls this afternoon telling me we'd lost the Chrysler account, that Ford was going to pull their contract, that we were looking at laying off 50 people because we couldn't meet our production schedule." He paused. "Let that sink in. Now I'm standing here at midnight watching a machine run that everyone told me was dead. Someone want to explain how that happened?" Pete started to speak, but Sarah cut him off. "No one was wrong, Mr. Henderson. The bearing did fail. The machine did need to be shut down. Your maintenance guys made the right call." She gestured at Big Bertha. "But they were solving for the symptom, not the disease. The bearing failed because the motor alignment was off. Fix the alignment, replace the bearing, and you're back in business." "And how did no one else see that?" "Because they weren't looking for it," Marcus said, surprising himself by speaking up. "We've all been so focused on keeping things running, meeting quotas, hitting deadlines, that we stopped really looking at the machines. We stopped listening to what they're trying to tell us." Henderson studied Marcus for a long moment. "You've been here a long time. 23 years. And in those 23 years, how many times have you put in work orders that got ignored?" Marcus felt the weight of the question. He could lie, play it safe, protect himself. But something about the night, about fixing Big Bertha, about Sarah's directness made him tell the truth. "Dozens, maybe more. We all have." "I know." Henderson's voice was quiet. "I know. And I'm sorry. We've been running lean for too long. Trying to compete with overseas manufacturers, with automation, with companies that don't care about quality the way we do. And somewhere along the line, we stopped investing in the things that matter. Proper maintenance, proper training, proper respect for the people who keep this place alive." He turned to Sarah. "Precision Machine Services, you said?" "Yes, sir." "You freelance?" "I work for PMS, but I take private contracts." "Why?" Henderson looked at Pete. "I want to hire her. Full consulting contract. I want her to evaluate every machine in this plant, train our maintenance staff on proper diagnostic techniques, and develop a real preventive maintenance program." Pete's eyebrows shot up. "Sir, That's going to be expensive. Not as expensive as losing Chrysler or Ford or having to lay off 50 people before Christmas. Henderson looked back at Sarah. What do you say? Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Marcus saw her calculating, considering. It's a big job. Could take months to do it right. I'm not looking for quick, I'm looking for right. And I'd need full access, no interference. If I find problems, I report them directly to you, not through middle management. Done. And I want Marcus as my liaison. He knows these machines better than anyone. I can't do this without someone who understands the history. Everyone turned to look at Marcus. He felt exposed, suddenly, uncertain. I'm just a machine operator. You're a craftsman, Sarah said firmly. You kept this machine alive for 23 years. You knew something was wrong and kept reporting it even when no one listened. That's not just anything. Henderson nodded. She's right. We need people like you teaching the next generation. Hell, we needed it years ago. Will you do it? Marcus looked at Big Bertha, running smoothly, perfectly. He thought about Linda at home, about their grown kids scattered across the country, about the years he had left before retirement. He thought about all the young workers he'd seen come and go, never getting proper training, never learning the deep knowledge that made the difference between adequate and excellent. Yes, he said. Yes, I'll do it. Good. Henderson shook Marcus's hand again, then Sarah's. Pete will work out the details with both of you. I want a preliminary assessment in 2 weeks, full program proposal in a month. He started to walk away, then turned back. And Marcus, thank you for not giving up on her. After Henderson left, the three of them stood there in the relative quiet of the night shift. Sarah was grinning. Pete looked like he'd been hit by a truck, in a good way. And Marcus felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Did that just happen? Pete asked. That just happened, Sarah confirmed. She looked at Marcus. You up for this? It's going to be a lot of work. I've been doing a lot of work for 23 years. Might as well do work that matters. That's the spirit. She checked her watch. It's almost 1 a.m. I should head back to my hotel, but tomorrow, or I guess today, we should start walking the floor, looking at the other machines. I want to see what we're dealing with. Sounds good. Marcus found himself looking forward to it, that old feeling of purpose stirring in his chest. After Sarah left, Pete and Marcus stood together by Big Bertha, watching her work. The night shift operator, a young guy named Tommy Chen, no relation to Sarah, as far as Marcus knew, was running a batch of parts, and everything was flowing smoothly. You know, Pete said quietly, I thought my career was over today. Thought they'd fire me for letting this machine die. It didn't die. No, thanks to you and Sarah. Pete shook his head. Henderson's right, you know. We've been doing this wrong. I've been doing this wrong. Pushing to meet numbers, ignoring the warning signs, just trying to make it through each day. You've been doing what corporate asked you to do. Maybe, but that's not an excuse. Pete looked at him. I'm going to do better, Marcus. Going to listen when you guys tell me there's a problem. Going to fight for the maintenance budget. Going to make sure we're not just running machines into the ground. I'll believe it when I see it, Marcus said, but he was smiling. Pete laughed. Fair enough. Go home, Marcus. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Marcus clocked out at 1:30 a.m. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars belonging to night shift workers. The November air was cold, promising snow before Thanksgiving. He sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine, just breathing, processing everything that had happened. His phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Still alive? He typed back. Alive. Fixed the machine. Got a new job. Home soon. Love you. Her response came immediately. My hero. Drive safe. Marcus smiled and started the truck. Through the factory windows, he could see Big Bertha still running, her lights bright, her motion sure. 23 years he'd cared for that machine, and tonight, with Sarah's help, he'd saved her life. But more than that, he'd found a new purpose. Teaching, passing on knowledge, making sure the next generation understood that machines weren't just equipment to be run until they broke. They were partners in the work, deserving of attention and respect and proper care. The truck rumbled out of the parking lot, and Marcus headed home through the quiet Detroit suburb streets. Somewhere behind him, Big Bertha kept working, and somewhere ahead of him, a new chapter was beginning. 3 months had passed since that November night, and Henderson Manufacturing had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The change started small: a new maintenance schedule, proper diagnostic training for the mechanics, a protocol for responding to operator concerns. But it rippled outward like stones dropped in still water. It was now late February, and Marcus stood in what used to be a storage room near the factory floor. It had been converted into a training center, with whiteboards covering the walls, a row of old machine components set up for hands-on practice, and a conference table where maintenance logs and technical manuals lay open. The room smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Sarah was drawing a diagram on one of the whiteboards, explaining bearing load calculations to a group of 5 mechanics and 3 machine operators. Marcus recognized all of them. Good workers, eager to learn, finally getting the training they should have received years ago. "See this angle?" Sarah tapped the whiteboard with her marker. "This is where the load concentrates if your alignment is off by even a fraction. The bearing starts wearing asymmetrically, and 6 months later you're looking at a failure that could have been prevented with 30 minutes of proper setup." Tommy Chen, the young night shift operator, raised his hand. "So, basically, we should be checking alignment every time we do a motor replacement." "Every time," Sarah confirmed. "Marcus, you want to add anything?" Marcus stepped forward. Public speaking still made him nervous, even after 3 months of doing it regularly, but he'd learned to push through. "The thing to remember is that machines talk to you. You all know that feeling when something's off, a vibration that wasn't there before. A sound that's changed, a part that's taking longer to complete. Don't ignore those feelings. Document them, report them. Give us a chance to catch problems before they become catastrophes." Jenny Morrison, who'd been attending these training sessions enthusiastically, spoke up. "It's weird how much has changed. Remember when we had to fight to get anyone to listen to a work order?" The group laughed, but it was rueful. Everyone remembered. "That's the old way," Pete said from the doorway. He'd started attending the training sessions a month ago, sitting in the back, taking notes like any other student. "The new way is we listen first, then act." Henderson made that clear. The training session continued for another hour. They covered preventive maintenance schedules, proper lubrication techniques, and how to use the new diagnostic equipment that Henderson had invested in. It wasn't cheap. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in new tools, training materials, and consultant fees, but the results spoke for themselves. Henderson Manufacturing hadn't had a major machine breakdown in 2 months. Production was up 8%. Quality defects were down 12%. The Chrysler account was secure. Ford had actually increased their orders, and they'd picked up 2 new clients based on their improving reliability. More importantly, morale had shifted. Workers who'd felt ignored now felt heard. Problems were being addressed rather than deferred. The constant stress of wondering what would break next had eased into something more manageable. After the training session ended and the others had filtered back to the floor, Sarah and Marcus sat at the conference table reviewing their assessment reports. They'd been through every major machine in the plant, documenting issues, recommending solutions, creating detailed maintenance schedules. "Building C's injection molders need new temperature controllers," Sarah said, making notes on her tablet. "The current ones are 15 years old and running way outside calibration. I'm surprised they haven't caused more quality issues." "Add it to the list." Marcus was reviewing a spreadsheet that seemed to grow longer every week. "We're up to 2.3 million in recommended upgrades now. Henderson's going to have a heart attack. Henderson's going to see the ROI analysis and approve it." Marcus had learned to think like a businessman over the past 3 months, or at least to translate mechanical needs into financial language that corporate understood. These upgrades will pay for themselves in reduced downtime and improved efficiency within 18 months. Look at you talking ROI. Sarah grinned at him. Remember when you were just a machine operator? I'm still just a machine operator. I just use bigger words now. They both laughed. The relationship between them had evolved from that first intense night of collaboration into something like friendship. They worked well together. Sarah's theoretical knowledge and diagnostic brilliance combined with Marcus's decades of practical experience and deep machine understanding. They'd become a team that the whole plant respected. Pete knocked on the doorframe even though the door was open. "Got a minute?" "Sure," Sarah said. "What's up?" Pete came in and sat down, and Marcus noticed he looked nervous, excited and nervous. The way people look when they're about to share important news. "I just got off a conference call with Henderson and the board. They've approved the full upgrade program." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. "The full program?" Sarah asked. "All 2.3 million? "All of it. Plus they're creating 2 new positions, a director of machine maintenance and a training coordinator." Pete paused. "They want Marcus for the training coordinator role." Marcus felt his heart skip. "What?" "It's a salaried position, better pay, normal hours, mostly. You'd be running the training program we've started, developing curriculum, mentoring new operators and mechanics. You'd still work closely with Sarah on the consulting side, but your primary job would be passing on your knowledge." "I don't have a degree," Marcus said automatically. "I never went to college." "They don't care. You have something better, experience, wisdom, and the ability to teach. I've watched you with the trainees, Marcus. You're good at this, really good." Marcus looked at Sarah, who was smiling. "You knew about this. Henderson called me last week, asked for my input. I told him you were a natural teacher and they'd be idiots not to promote you." She shrugged. "Sorry for the secrecy. It wasn't my news to share." "What about the director of machine maintenance position?" Marcus asked, his mind still reeling from the offer. Pete grinned. "That's the other thing I wanted to talk to Sarah about." "No," Sarah said immediately. "You haven't even heard the offer. I work for Precision Machine Services. I'm a consultant. I don't do permanent positions. You'd be making twice what you make as a consultant. Full benefits, equity stake in the company, complete authority over maintenance operations, and..." Pete pulled out a piece of paper. "Henderson's prepared to offer you a 5-year contract with this compensation package." He slid the paper across the table. Sarah picked it up, scanned it, and her eyes widened. Marcus couldn't see the numbers, but her reaction told him everything. "That's generous," she said carefully. "Henderson doesn't want to lose you. Neither do I. Neither does anyone in this plant." Pete leaned forward. "Look, I know you like the freedom of consulting, but what we're building here, it's special. It's proof that manufacturing can still work in this country if we do it right. We need you to help us keep building it." Sarah set down the paper and was quiet for a long moment. Marcus watched her think, saw the wheels turning. He'd learned to read her expressions over the past months. The slight furrow in her brow meant she was calculating probabilities, weighing options. "Can I think about it?" she finally asked. "Take a week. But Marcus, I need your answer faster. We want to announce both positions at the company meeting next Friday." Marcus thought about Linda, about their conversations over dinner, where he'd come home energized instead of exhausted, talking about the training sessions, about helping young workers understand the craft he loved. He thought about retirement, which had seemed like an ending before, but now felt like it could be a new beginning. "Yes," he said. "I'll take it." Pete broke into a huge grin. "Excellent. I'll tell Henderson." He stood up, shook Marcus's hand. "Congratulations. You've earned this." He looked at Sarah. "Think about it, please." After Pete left, Marcus and Sarah sat in silence for a moment. "You okay?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, just processing. 3 months ago I was running a machine. Now I'm a training coordinator." "You are always more than just someone running a machine. Now you have a title that matches what you've actually been doing." Marcus nodded slowly. "What about you? Are you going to take it?" Sarah stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the factory floor. From here they could see Big Bertha running smoothly, Tommy Chen operating her with the care and attention Marcus had taught him. Beyond her, rows of other machines hummed in orchestrated precision. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've been freelancing since my dad died. It was a way to honor him, using what he taught me, but not being tied down to one place. I could move on when things got hard or boring. And this isn't boring. No, this is the opposite of boring." She turned to face him. "What we're doing here, it matters. We're not just fixing machines. We're changing how people think about maintenance, about training, about respecting the tools and the people who use them. That's bigger than any single consultation job. But it means staying, committing, being responsible not just for fixing today's problems, but for building tomorrow's solutions." She smiled slightly. "That's scarier than I expected. You've got a week to decide." "Yeah." Sarah checked her watch. "Come on. I want to check on the CNC machines in Building B before end of shift. Jenny said she heard something odd yesterday." They walked out to the factory floor together. Marcus noticed how workers nodded to them now, how conversations paused as they passed, not in fear, but in respect. The plant felt different than it had 3 months ago. It felt alive, cared for, valued. Over the next week, Marcus threw himself into planning for his new role. He outlined training programs, sketched curriculum ideas, met with the HR department about hiring additional trainers. Linda watched him work at the kitchen table in the evenings, spreading papers everywhere, making notes in margins, and she smiled. "You're happy," she said one night, bringing him coffee. "I am," he realized. "I really am. Because you're making a difference. Because I finally get to share what I know. All those years learning Big Bertha, learning the craft. It doesn't have to die with me. I can pass it on." Linda kissed the top of his head. "Your father would be proud." Marcus's father had been a mechanic too, at a different plant that had closed in the 90s. He died bitter, watching his skills become obsolete, seeing the industry he loved transform into something unrecognizable. Marcus had carried that bitterness for years, wondering if he'd end the same way. But not anymore. Not with this new chapter opening. On Friday, the company meeting was held in the factory's main break room, expanded with temporary seating to fit all 200-plus employees. Henderson stood at the front, and for the first time Marcus really saw him, not as a distant owner, but as someone who genuinely cared about this place and these people. "We've had a difficult few years," Henderson began. "We've lost contracts, struggled with reliability, watched competitors eat our lunch. I won't pretend it's been easy, but something changed 3 months ago." He gestured to the back of the room, where Big Bertha was visible through the windows, her lights bright. A machine we all thought was done got a second chance. And in saving that machine, 2 people showed us a better way forward, not just for equipment, but for how we operate as a company. Henderson introduced Marcus's promotion first. The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt his face heat with embarrassment and pride. People he'd worked with for decades were standing, clapping, a few whistling. Jenny had tears in her eyes. "Marcus will be leading our new comprehensive training program," Henderson continued. "Every operator, every mechanic, everyone who touches our equipment will go through his training. We're investing in our people the way we should have been all along." Then Henderson turned to the second announcement. "For Director of Machine Maintenance, we made an offer to Sarah Chen, who many of you have worked with over these past months." The room went quiet, everyone turning to look at Sarah, who was standing near the side wall. Marcus caught her eye, and he saw her take a deep breath. "I'm pleased to say she's accepted," Henderson finished. More applause, louder this time. Sarah looked surprised by the enthusiasm, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression. Acceptance, commitment, the recognition that she belonged here. After the meeting, people crowded around Marcus and Sarah, offering congratulations, asking questions about the training program, expressing excitement about the changes coming. Marcus fielded questions, made promises, and felt the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders, not heavy, but real. When the crowd finally thinned, Sarah found him by Big Bertha. He had his hand on the machine, a gesture that had become automatic over the years. "You did it," she said. "You saved her." "We did it," Marcus corrected, "and we're going to keep doing it, for all of them." Sarah put her hand on the machine too, feeling the smooth vibration of perfect alignment, perfect balance, perfect care. "Yeah, we are." Outside the factory windows, the February sun was setting, painting the Detroit suburb in shades of orange and gold. The first shift was ending, the second preparing to begin. The machines hummed their constant song, but now it was a song of maintenance and care, of knowledge passed down, of problems caught early instead of ignored. Marcus thought about that November night when everyone had declared Big Bertha dead. He thought about Sarah's confidence, her knowledge, her willingness to see beyond symptoms to causes. He thought about all the machines in this plant, all the workers who operated them, all the knowledge that could be shared instead of lost. "Thank you," he said to Sarah, "for seeing what nobody else saw, for teaching me that I had more to offer than just keeping things running." "You taught yourself that," Sarah replied. "I just gave you a push." They stood there together as the shift change happened around them, workers clocking out, others clocking in, the eternal rhythm of manufacturing continuing as it had for generations and would for generations more, as long as people like Marcus and Sarah were there to keep it alive. Big Bertha hummed beneath their hands, and somewhere in her mechanical heart, in the perfect alignment of her parts, in the careful maintenance that now defined her existence, was the promise that what was saved could stay saved. What was learned could be taught, and what was broken could always, always be fixed, if you knew how to listen, how to care, and how to see beyond the symptom to the cause. The factory lights shone bright against the growing darkness, and inside, the machines sang on.